want to bring in now Middle East analyst Asher Westropp-Evans. He's in Tel Aviv. Asher, great to see you and great to have you on the show. Is Israel violating any international laws by establishing presence in the demarcation line or otherwise demilitarized zone on the Golan Heights?
We need to be very clear about the situation that we're seeing in Syria right now. With the overthrow of the Assad government and the intake of the rebels, HTS, the deals that were put in place way back in 1974 that established that buffer zone lose some of their relevance in the current space because of the insecurity that's being faced within Syria. And this is exactly what Israel is looking to mitigate and ensuring that Islamist groups with intent to take militant actions against Israel, and let's be clear here, HTS is, as marked by the United States and others, a foreign terrorist organization still. And they are currently holding much of the power that was previously held by the Assad government. And Israel is keen to ensure that they do not use that power to threaten Israel's sovereign territory, to threaten the Israeli border, and to threaten that buffer zone, which is a key strategic military area there in the Upper Golan Heights, in Mount Hermon, as you said. These areas are absolutely crucial to control in that region, and Israel understands that reality and is ensuring that they are making clear and concise space to ensure that rebel groups do not take over control of that area and potentially threaten Israel and Israelis, as Israel has seen from the likes of Hezbollah in Lebanon and, of course, Hamas in the Gaza Strip.
But to the Syrian interim government, Israel is jeopardizing the small semblance of peace that exists in Syria today. Why do you think that is not so on the side of Israel?
I'd reject that claim outright. Frankly, Israel has ensured by destroying the mass, military stockpiles, 70 to 80% of Syrian military stockpiles, as we've heard reported. This ensures that the Syrian people will be able to flourish in a way that they are not beholden to the sort of threats of chemical warfare, the threats of chemical weapons being used against their own people, as we saw the Assad regime do over the course of the Syrian civil war. The Assad regime was willing to use these weapons against their own people. At the moment, the state in Syria is so unsure, the government is so nascent, new, and unclear as to how everything will work out. To have these massive military stockpiles available, who knows who may take over those, who knows what powers may come to fill those vacuums. And Israel was not willing to take that risk in ensuring that those weapons could be used, certainly against the Syrian people, and of course against Israel itself by any future power that may come in the wake of what we saw. I mean, we only have to look back to 2015 in the heart of the Syrian civil war to see that ISIS had so much power and influence in the area and risked taking control of much of these military stockpiles. If the likes of an extreme group like that, let alone HTS or other interests in the region, could take control of those military stockpiles, who knows what sort of massacre and damage that they could wrought with that sort of power. And frankly, Israel has removed those elements from the playing field and ensured safety and security will be much more likely to be continue for the Syrian people and of course for Israel and its own people.
It kind of sounds like Israel put in a check on HTS and other rebel groups in Syria. But what should be the UN position on Syria at this time? The interim government has written to the UN Security Council asking it to caution Israel on its move in on the Golan Heights. So should the UN recognize this as, legitimate government in Syria? Should they treat Syria now as a member of the international community?
I mean, it's frankly such a difficult and new circumstance. It's really hard for any power, whether it be the United Nations or any others, to be able to determine what will happen as the dust settles in Syria. We're only a few days out, really, from the collapse of the Assad regime. And let's remember that HTS, the leading rebel group that claimed power coming in from the north down all the way through to Damascus in that lightning raid, are frankly an offshoot of al-Qaeda. They were affiliated with the sort of extremist Islamist ideological groups of the past that had been designated as foreign terrorist organizations. Now, whether they're a tiger that can change their stripes, whether they are indeed a representative of the sort of peaceful, new governance that they claim they want to, time will tell. And I certainly believe, and I believe Israel as well believes that they should be given the time to see what will happen. But frankly, as it stands now, it's unknown whether HTS really are coming in as a benevolent freers and freedom fighters, or whether they represent a new form of control, power, and dominance in Syria. And until there's been time for the dust to settle and for HTS to truly prove what they are interested in doing, and if indeed they will retain power into the longer term, and other powers such as Turkey, US, Iran, Russia, others won't take control or parts or all of the country. It's really not clear what the UN or any other large international institutions should be doing inside Syria.
Right. Asher, let's take a look at Turkey, which has been on the sidelines, since this move by the rebels, the HTF, all the way into Damascus. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump says he thinks Turkey is very smart. Turkey did an unfriendly takeover. I'm reading President-elect Trump's words here. He says, Turkey did an unfriendly takeover without a lot of lives being lost. I can say that Assad was a butcher. What he did to children. The Turkish president, Recep Erdogan, is now talking about an inclusive government in Syria, but he does have a stake in what is currently going on. He did have a stake even before Assad left.
Absolutely. I mean, Turkey, I would say, is one of the most critical players when it comes to the modern Syrian state, if indeed there even is a single Syrian state anymore. Erdogan has banked much of his reputation on backing opposition groups, throughout Syria over the course of the Syrian civil war, and was put on the back foot for a long time by the resurgence of the Assad regime. I mean, many say he's now been vindicated by the collapse of the Assad regime and the takeover by HTS, but really there's so much still at play. This is not simply a foreign powers issue when it comes to Turkey. This is really a domestic issue inside Turkey when it comes to the politics there, driven, of course, in large part by Kurdish militia groups, which have elements of control inside eastern Turkey and, of course, throughout Syria and into Iraq. Really, this has been a thorn in the side of Erdogan's regime for so long, and he would be very interested in ridding himself of any Kurdish militant influences. Although these same Kurdish groups are some of those that are backed by the US. So really the situation there is so complex. There are so many interested parties, and Turkey, for their part, has a whole lot of interest. There have even been reports over the last 24 hours of Turkey building forces in the east and potentially launching their own incursions into Syria from the north there. But frankly, with a 900-kilometer border between Turkey and Syria, there's so much potentially still at play. And really, it's too early to tell what will happen in the long term.
Too early to tell, but I'm sure he's keenly watching what's going on in Syria. Another person keenly watching, I believe, is the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is hosting the ousted Syrian president right now in Russia. I'm sure that, he's also thinking what could happen. I mean, this was a government, the Assad government was one that seemed to have been quite stable in Syria. And it just seemed like over time, that power that Assad had over his people dwindled. You think that President Vladimir Putin could also be thinking about the future of Assad and his own future, being that he can only host the former Syrian president for as long as he's there as Russian leader?
Yeah, certainly, I think a lot of dictators the world over would probably be looking now to the lessons of history and seeing how, particularly across the Middle East, from Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and now Assad in Syria, all being toppled. Surely Putin, must be thinking about his own future and whether he will one day need to flee his country or be found under a military trial, found in a pipe in a hole somewhere, whatever it might be. A lot of these dictators have found pretty abysmal demises towards the ends of their regimes. As for what the future of the Assad government is and Assad himself, as we saw from the statement released on Telegram by Assad, he claims that he was in the right the whole time. He didn't mean to flee the country, but found himself trapped on a Russian military base and then decided to take his way out of there. It seems a fanciful tale, really, of a man who, it looks like, fled with his tail between his legs as his government was falling all around him. What his future holds, well, it seems to be one of irrelevance. But that being said, people would have said that before about the Assad regime. So I suppose we can't fully count it out, as we said, until we have a clearer picture of what things look like on the ground in Syria.
But let's just imagine for a second what could have happened to Assad had the rebels caught up with him in Damascus.
Well, as I said earlier, making the comparisons to the other recent deposed dictators of the Middle East, we can only imagine that it would not have been pretty. But frankly, I don't think there's such value in weighing these counterfactuals. The fact of the matter is that Assad did flee, as I said, with his tail between his legs, flew to Russia, flew to Moscow, where his ally Putin there was ready to receive him with open arms, while his countrymen, frankly, rejected his and his father's 54-year rule of Syria in favor of whatever comes next. As we've said, while that isn't clear, frankly, what is clear is that the Assad regime does not seem to have a ready future in Syria or amongst the Syrian people, no matter what ilk or stripe that those particular Syrians have, as I said, with so many competing interests and differing views in the area.
Middle East analyst Asher Westropp-Evans, has been a real pleasure speaking with you on The World Today.
Thank you.